because I was 29, I was about to get married. I was looking out at the future of my life and things that mattered to me, my family, my health, my career progress. I realized alcohol wasn't serving and was probably holding back a lot of those things. And the second I put alcohol off to the side, it was like the biggest life hack I'd ever discovered.
Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome to the Deal Maker Show. So today we have a founder that it's an amazing company. I'm a big fan. My fridge is full of his beers that him and his team have been putting together, and what a remarkable story. Very inspiring. The way that they've thought about scaling manufacturing, building, financing. I mean, all of the above. I think that the episode today is going to be very inspiring. Also, the way that they've dealt with all types of economic cycles that have been coming their way. So brace yourself for what's coming. What a conversation that we have ahead of us. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest today, Bill Shufelt. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Cheers. It's exciting to be here.
So
Thank
Bill,
you for the kind words on our beers also.
I mean, mega fan. So it's going to be exciting to chat about it today. So Bill, tell us, give us a walk through memory lane. How was life growing up for you in Connecticut?
I had a great childhood. It was pretty straightforward, a great family, great community, small community, and grew up loving the outdoors, loving sports. I was always in motion. My calendar was always full. I did every activity under the sun, played at a minimum 3 sports year round, seriously, but usually that was 6 to 8 sports, and generally just loved being in motion, playing outdoors, sports. But yeah, grew up in a town that was like very finance oriented. We're just outside New York City. And I left that town basically for college thinking finance. And that was kind of the life I was on.
And why finance? Was it just because you were just surrounded by a bunch of investment bankers and private equities and so forth? Or how did the whole finance, idea come to you?
It was really almost the default path. We came from a wealthy town. My family was definitely not wealthy. We were definitely pretty thrifty, but we had a really nice childhood. But a lot of the people I saw doing the best in our town were in finance, and so that's kind of what I aspired to. Was I attributed that to success, and also I found finance and investing really intellectually interesting. I've always been a math science person, and so I kind of went to college with that track in mind, and then at Middlebury, which was a great educational experience and great athletic experience. The companies that came to interview people at Middlebury for the best jobs in my mind were also finance people. So finance companies. So it was, Goldman, Lehman, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, everyone. So that was definitely the track I was on, and did finance through college, 10 years New York City out of that. And it was a great start to the career. I loved sharpening my sword, if you will, in the financial field. So it was a good start.
Well, I mean, you ended up in Point72, Point72, Steve Cohen, one of the probably most successful hedge fund guys, and one of the top firms. I mean, now they're obviously doing a bunch of stuff around startups and things like that. But how do you end up there? And what was the experience too of being there? Because I've also heard that the culture in Point72 is quite competitive as well.
Yeah, honestly, it's a perfect fit for me. I'm an extremely competitive person. My default mode is on, and if I'm of course I can relax, but my favored state of motion is moving and being on, and so I can't say enough good things about Point72. So I started in the financial world at Knight Capital Group, which I had a really good professor at Middlebury who helped me think through what I was actually really interested in finance. And I really zoomed in on trading, and I loved the concept of trading, and I loved how fast paced it was. And he said when I was interviewing at firms, Knight was one of those firms. And he actually said, he's I know it's not the biggest headline firm, but that might be an awesome spot for you to learn the craft of trading. It's as pure a trading shop as there was. the firm's evolved over time, but at that point in the early 2000s, like it was pure trading NASDAQ, like, and so it was a great 7 years at night and worked with amazing people. And then through there, I built relationships with people at SAC and learned of a job opening. I got my CFA and I started to move up the investment ladder there. And point 72 was exactly where I wanted to be. It was like at the top of the investment process. It was high turnover, a lot of trading, very intellectually challenging. And the way Steve built that firm and attracted talent, it was the smartest collection of people I will ever be in a room with. The intensity all day was great. It was as merit based an organization as you can. So if you show up and you are prepared and you get it done day in, day out, like it was as merit based and opportunity driven as you could ask for. So I had a great experience there. And, it goes right to the person with his name on the door. He was in that seat every day. And the reason it's known as a competitive environment is because he is literally in the middle of the room eating people for breakfast because he is on. And I really respect how he shows up for work every day and drives the organization forward. And it's a really talented group of people around. So I loved my time there and thought I would never leave.
So I guess, hey, from a leadership and team building perspective, what would be your three biggest takeaways from your time at Point 72?
Yeah. So even like so in that 12 years of finance, I was very fortunate to have both really good leaders and very mediocre leaders. And I learned equally as much from both. And I did take away that a merit-based, opportunity-driven culture is probably the most important thing. Like, of course, people love the soft, nice edges of culture, but like at the end of the day, there's nothing more fulfilling than having opportunity and feeling good about like the work you're driving forward. So I took a lot of those merit based and opportunity driven elements. Is definitely one. And then especially at both Knight and Point 72. So one of my original bosses at Knight Capital Group, a guy named Joe, really believed in my potential and kept like reinforcing that in me and giving me more and more opportunity. And that carried through at Point 72 with my boss there, Jeff, who really believed in my potential also and kept encouraging me. I've taken that to Athletic and given people a ton of opportunity and believed in them. And people who run with opportunity cover a lot of ground and advance really quickly within the walls of Athletic also.
So then tell us too about, what happened, with stopping, drinking, because 12 years ago, that's basically what happened and how that, I mean, you did that for lifestyle reasons, but that kind of like triggered this rocket ship that you're writing now. So how did the whole origins of the Athletic, come to mind?
Yeah, so in the early 2000s, when I was entering the financial field, like it was a badge of honor to be hungover, to be out, and like people were at steak dinners, happy hours, everything 4 nights a week. And it was a very boozy Wall Street culture. And I saw that shifting dramatically towards a very performance culture over the 10, 12 years I was in finance. And towards the end of that, it became as like more aspirational and more respected to like ask a contact on Wall Street, hey, rather than like a steak dinner, would you want to meet at Barry's boot camp in the morning or something? And so there's definitely this shift going on. And I had a similar shift in my life. As I was 29, I was about to get married. I was looking out at the future of my life and things that mattered to me, my family, my health, my career progress, like some really big bucket items. I realized alcohol wasn't serving and was probably holding back a lot of those things. And so I put alcohol to the side. And of course, I was drinking too much from time to time, like most people in their 20s do. And the second I put alcohol off to the side, it was like the biggest life hack I'd ever discovered. I was extremely sharp every day at work. It was like this virtuous cycle of things in my life: better sleep, better eating, better performance, better relationships. Um, and it all just kind of built on itself. And like I found myself falling in love with distance running. And like I used to just survive workouts and sleeping 8 hours through the night, which I thought was an impossibility for like a busy adult. And so I never looked back from that choice. And I was very lucky in the workplace too. Like I kind of shared that. Like I was like, hey, I'm making a line in the sand. I'm done drinking, and shared it with my colleagues. And actually that was like really well received. And so from there, I was still out at 3 or 4 work dinners a week. and would often have nothing in my hand or like, a standard brown level or brown bottle non-alcoholic beer from like the 1980s in my hand. And it would inevitably bring up a ton of questions. And I also just, I'm someone who loves beer, loves nice drinks, loves food. And it like broke my mind that in today's modern, healthy, busy world, that all the adult beverages only have alcohol. Where it's like, why is everything centered around this one functional ingredient when I started looking at stats and stuff, and the average adult has zero point 0.1 drinks or less per week, which is crazy. And so, or 60% of adults have zero point 0.1 drinks or less per week. And so I thought of how underserved the adult community was in terms of offerings. But then more importantly, I looked around and I was like, wow, moderation, even though it aligns perfectly with modern health standards, is totally out of reach and not on the menu. Like if you go out and you want to pay $15 for an adult beverage, it wasn't an option without alcohol. And so I saw this big economic opportunity developing, and that kind of like stuck in my craw for a year as like these awkward social situations, the frustration. I was in places I wanted to spend money, there were no options. And eventually I started saying this out loud to people, and friends and my wife particularly were like, you should fix that. And I was like, what do you mean? And my wife really encouraged me to start looking into that, where she was getting her MBA at the time, which was very helpful and probably receptive. So me and my wife started to look into it, and that started kind of the 2-year business planning journey of Athletic Brewing before making a fateful decision to walk out the door at point 72.
I mean, that's very calculated, the risk. But 2 years building the business plan. I mean, typically you see it more of people just taking the plunge or like maybe like doing an MVP. 2 years business planning. I mean, what were you doing over those 2 years?
So there was definitely like sprints where I'd work on it a lot and times where I wouldn't work on it at all for 2 to 3 weeks. But it was really where the passion and the fire for the idea turned on. And I'm so glad I had such a long business planning period where, yeah, there are so many businesses that just kind of launch without much thought. And, I feel for those founders. Then they're like up in the air and trying to build it as it goes. I had a really long business planning cycle of 2 years. And at the end of that, honestly, I wasn't going to quit my job. And my wife encouraged me to she was like, we've saved enough. You should do this. And she pushed me out the door of my old job, basically. And then I had another 18-month period after that where I was looking for a co-founder, found a co-founder through a lot of rejection. And then we were home brewing to get to our MVP product through that period. So, but then me and him were talking about what's important for the company, building the foundation of the company, employee handbooks, mission, culture, like all these really big things. And so I feel very fortunate that we had this huge foundation of planning before we then were out the door in selling our products and scaling and hiring and everything. Because I said differently, we had 18 months where it's just me and our co-founder to talk about what's important and build the foundation, where a lot of founders are often building and all of a sudden have 25 people around them, and you're trying to convey a culture that doesn't exist yet to a lot of people. And like the long lead time has been an advantage for us in many ways.
So what do you think needed to happen in that 24-month mark that was so clear to you and to your wife that you needed to take action on this? What was that inflection point?
So that was when it went from economic to actually like a meaningful, fulfilling impact that I could have. And so I described previously how moderation was out of reach for most people. And like I probably would have moderated my drinking 10 years earlier than I did if there were any options available. And as you look at the stats out there, and Athletic Brewing will never stand on a soapbox and point a finger at for decisions. And like, we're not out against the alcohol industry, but like there is a lot of stats out there where hundreds of thousands of people die from alcohol every year. 5% of cancers are attributed to alcohol. 40% of incarcerated people were drunk when they committed their crimes. And like these stats just go on and on and on, the impact alcohol has in society. And I'm not out to attack alcohol, but at least if we can give people options to be moderate when they want. I then saw, well, there's also 15 million people in documented recovery in the US too. And so I like if we made moderation accessible rather than like anonymous and hidden, I saw a way that, we could positively impact tens of millions of lives. And so like when that light bulb went on, I'd been working this hedge fund job that was very self-serving. It was rewarding for sure. But I went from a place where I was only going to positively impact myself and my family to potentially tens of millions of people. And like that fire lighting is something that, as you know, I know you've talked to 1,000 entrepreneurs plus. It is so hard to build a business, and the valleys are so deep, and every day can be excruciating in its own way. That fire for me burns so bright that no matter how challenging any day is, like I can plow through it and I'm excited to meet it. And so that moment of knowing I could have a huge impact on tens of millions of people has been so pivotal to my whole journey.
Now, one thing too that I find really interesting here is that you've been now at this point for 2 years, doing all the legwork, figuring out the roadmap, the economics. It sounds like you had a clear plan. So why not going solo? Why did you decide that you needed a co-founder, to be part of this journey?
Oh yeah, I definitely don't want to paint it as if I had a super clear vision. It's actually like so funny to look back and think of how delusional I was. I think I had a good foundation in like skills like finance, sales and marketing. I love the HR and like legal elements of our business, although I'm not skilled technically in those areas. But I had enormous blind spots and like definitely needed a technical co-founder. I had never brewed a batch of beer in my whole life. I didn't really know anything about operating a manufacturing facility. And so I teamed up with like I got rejected by hundreds of brewers I tried to network with. And then ultimately found a really highly awarded craft brewer in Santa Fe, New Mexico named John Walker, who is such a talented guy, but also a great person. And turns out is like a lifelong learner. And me and him have been on this learning journey together, both growing with the company. And so it's it's been one of the most important things, probably the most important thing in the whole athletic journey is finding someone who really matches my vision, my enthusiasm, and we complement each other so well that it could have never worked without either one of us, I think.
So let's say I put you now into an elevator with all of our listeners, okay, and you only have maybe like 15 to 30 seconds to tell them. I mean, the first time you see them, to tell them what the athletic is all about. What would you tell them?
Revolutionizing beer for the modern adult. Alcohol has been a tag along on adult beverages for 5,000 years. This is a way that anyone can drink adult beverages anytime, whether it's a meal pairing or refreshment, just a de stressor. But it's like the best part of your day every day without the alcohol. Like up in for the last 5,000 years, adult beverages have been a line in the sand where you all of a sudden have alcohol and it takes all these things off the table for the rest of your day. And we've kind of freed it from that.
I mean, I gotta say, as a consumer of the athletic, I was blown away because I had tried. I mean, I remember I was dealing, just my story real quick here. I had a concussion playing soccer and I couldn't drink during the time that I was recovering. So I tried a couple of non-alcoholic beers, and they taste like really non-alcoholic. It tastes so different. But then all of a sudden, I had this cousin, and he was like, "Hey, I think you may want to taste this one," and it was like the Athletic, I think it was the lager, and it was mind blowing how amazing the taste was. It was just like drinking the same, that I was used to. And then since then I was like, my God, I'm just gonna drink this. Now, in your guys' case, I know that once you guys got together and all of this, it took 2 years of iterating and really getting it, to that point. What were some of the testings and what were some of those phases that you guys needed to go through in order to be like, I think we got this taste right now?
Yeah. So most CPG businesses go from idea to finding someone to make it. So like it jumps to a contract manufacturer and then they outsource production the rest of the way. What we did differently at Athletic was kind of our first principles moment was all non-alcoholic beers still made with like 1970s or earlier technology, and we need to reinvent how it's made. And so we took it down to the screws, homebrewing on Gatorade jugs, and did hundreds of batches like that. And finally, around like batch 30 or batch 40, and our co-founder John speaks to this really well, is the beer started to taste actually really good. And then by like batch 60, it was just plain old good beer, not good non-alcoholic beer. And we've always said without compromise, it's got to be award-winning beer that stacks up to any beer you have. And so we achieved that. And then an even bigger decision was that we were going to not outsource our production. We were going to build it all ourselves, own the quality of everything we do. And so that was a huge quality decision that it continues to separate us from the field. Non-alcoholic beer is a really heavily imported and contract brewed category. And we are making it here in the US. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars on building manufacturing plants. But that is like such a differentiator on the quality. Like every beer that goes out our door has undergone over 55 quality tests, and for like spec, for sensory, everything, every step of the way. And so it's kind of that dedication to quality that's been a major distancing factor. I will say that was an extreme turnoff to early investors also, what the capital road ahead looked like for this business path.
So at what point do you guys realize, hey, I think we're into something here? You really felt like you were turning a corner.
Yeah. So in 2017, me and John couldn't get anyone to talk to us. 2018, as we were launching, I'd gone around the state of Connecticut at that point and gotten hundreds of accounts. So like local liquor stores, all the way up to Whole Foods had like tasted the beer and thought it was great. And so I got a list of accounts there. And I convinced a local distributor, Star Distributors, who's the biggest beer distributor in Connecticut, to take us in, which was a huge win. And I'm thankful that they saw that opportunity in us. And we launched. And the rate of sale was not great to start. And so, one of my biggest underestimations was no one had been looking at the non-alcoholic set for 50 years. Why all of a sudden would they start shopping that shelf? Like, they wouldn't even know that there's a new product over there. There hasn't been anything exciting over there ever. And so I realized I had to get hundreds, if not thousands of people shopping these shelves all across Connecticut really fast. And we did that in a couple of ways. I started going to races every weekend. So like at like a liquor store sampling, you can talk to like 20 people in 2 hours, and it's like pretty inefficient use of time. But if I go to a local 5K down the street from, a store that has our beer, I may interact with 300 to 500 people in like a 20 to 30 minute period. And so I can pull up a full cooler. I usually run the race myself for fun. Then I'm happy, sweaty behind the table, handing out hundreds of beers. And then all of a sudden you have dozens of people the next week going into the store to buy the beer. So then I saw that starting to work. And then I did 75 races across the area that summer, much to my wife's chagrin. It wasn't the best family summer. And then the next year we had 5 salespeople, and we did like 350 events that summer. And so we really built it brick by brick that way. The other very differentiated thing we did in marketing early on was, so if you go back 15 years to the craft brewing scene in New England or anywhere in the country, there'd be a brewery everyone's excited about launching. And you'd have to drive to that brewery and wait in line at the brewery for hours to get this beer that you wanted. And distribution is such a hurdle. You have to get on distributors' trucks, and then they have to sell it in stores to find it. And then if you want to go even like a few counties away, you have to get another distributor, let alone states. So like to build a national DSD beer network, we have 270 plus distributors at Athletic, which takes multiple years. Beverage on e-commerce wasn't really a thing back in 2018. But I built a website, and I just started putting our beer for sale on the website. And people were like, "You're a total moron. No one's ever going to buy beer online." And I was like, "We'll see. I'll pack the packages at night." And all of a sudden it was like 5 orders a day on no marketing budget, basically. So it was like 5 orders a day. Then the next week it was like 10 orders a day. All of a sudden I was coming in and there was like 30 orders a day. Then we came in on like, within like 2 months, it was like 200 orders were sitting there on Monday when I got in. And like all of a sudden that local taproom experience where people had to drive and go there, I had opened a national taproom where people could order in minutes, and then we would mail it to them. And at the same time, like non-alcoholic beer had been a shelf of like 5 boring lagers before. When Athletic Brewing launched, it was all of a sudden IPAs, stouts, golden ales, And John was making a different, unique, limited variety every week to a category that had never had any variety. And so all of a sudden, people were seeing like double IPAs, gozes, and like pumpkin beers and really fun launches. And so when we would put these beers for sale at 5 o'clock on a Monday, it was like a Taylor Swift concert on Ticketmaster. Like they were selling out in like 30 seconds. And so that was a great marketing tool also because we not only had built this national audience, but we had this unbelievable data set too. No beer company had ever had first party data from their whole customer base before. And so that was a big advantage. And so all of a sudden going forward at that point, I knew I'd made it because we were selling out so fast. The race and sampling strategy was selling out our beer at the grocery stores and liquor stores we were at, like to the point where people were meeting our distributors' trucks in the parking lot at Whole Foods. It wasn't even making it to the shelf. And then, so there's this like huge amount of demand. Plus, I could see all the data, and that gave us really good data to go out with our future fundraising rounds. Then,
Wow. Well,
the downside,
let's talk
yeah, the
about,
downside of that is we outgrew the brewery in 10 months.
well, we'll talk about scale, and I guess that a piece of it you were alluding to it is the investment, right? I know that you guys have done a bunch of rounds. You've raised over 220, I think 225 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, but walk us through what was the experience. What was that journey like of going through all those rounds and raising the money for a company like this?
Yeah. So our first angel round was we were essentially raising $3 million to build the first non-alcoholic production brewery in the country, and it was a category that had no momentum. The category basically didn't exist. Surely no marketing excitement, and we had no product. So raising that first angel round was extremely difficult. It was 120 plus meetings, mostly rejections, and then so I in the first 50 meetings, I would say it was like 90% rejections. And then all of a sudden, we started to network to people like one layer beyond people who had heard about it. And so we were getting a lot of inbounds then at that point of people who I didn't necessarily know, but were really excited because they had heard about it and reached out. And so we ended up with an angel team of about 70 people in that first round that helped us build the first brewery. And that group helped carry us through three financing rounds. And so we outgrew that first brewery in about 10 months, which was way faster than we anticipated. And we basically did a round a year for 4 or 5 years after that. And, I know there's a lot of companies that raise a lot of venture money. We were mostly private capital and investor capital through those early rounds. But like the major difference with us is we weren't just like buying Instagram ads and throwing money into the paper shredder like a lot of brands were in this 0% interest time. And, a lot of our competition still in this category, there's over 150 brands. Most of our competition still has not built anything. They're just spending, spending, spending. And they're brands who have raised way more than we had at that stage in our life still and not built anything. We were putting steel in the ground with our dollars. And so of that 225 million, over 150 million of that went into like actually building breweries. We're currently building our fourth brewery right now that'll be online by the end of this summer. We also were building a national sales force, and there was no marketing in non-alcoholic beer. So we had to market the category, and like we had that obligation and leading from the front, and that we were spending on marketing out in front of where the category growth was. And I think a lot of companies have benefited from athletic spending on marketing and they still don't spend much on it. So,
And as you're talking there about scaling too, and a lot of people listening, they're probably used to the scaling of technology, tech startup software, maybe hardware. I guess in this case, scaling manufacturing. How does that look like?
yeah, so manufacturing, when I told investors I was building manufacturing and planned to continue to do that, that was a hard no for a lot of people. And like I'd have whole dinners of 8 to 10 people basically stand up and walk out when we got to that point. And same thing with institutional investors. A lot of venture capital firms want you to spend as quickly as you can, but they have a 5-year time horizon, and building manufacturer does not align with 5-year time horizons. And so we had to find the right investors who believed in a multi-year period to spend on manufacturing and spend on marketing, and then with the faith that gross margins and EBITDA would catch up. And not many companies make that turn. We are really disciplined in how we spend and disciplined financially to make sure that that did play out. And we were really, I'd say, like rigorous stewards of investor capital as well. We take that obligation extremely seriously. And so, but yeah, in terms of scaling manufacturing specifically, I came from a financial background. I had my CFA. I thought I knew everything in the world about financial statements. The biggest difference for entrepreneurs between financial statements and operating models is like the granularity of, so most of my models I had built as if the breweries would be running at full capacity and that I was almost at economies of scale ingredient costs from the start. As I started to do an honest assessment of our ingredient cost and COGS builds in 2018, 2019, after we launched our business, utilization is one of the hardest factors because very often our breweries were being run at under 50%. And as we're growing 100% plus, there's such a brief moment in time where you're running your breweries at full utilization before you have to build the next brewery and layer in a lot more overhead. So that's something I would definitely make sure entrepreneurs are getting right. But also, like the variable costs of logistics and like shipping costs. And here I was, my model had not been built around e-commerce, but e-commerce went to 70% of our business. And a lot of that beer I was shipping all the way across the country. So we were losing more money each package we sold than we were making. And so getting to the granular bit of the operating model was super important. But like that scaling manufacturing utilization is such an important thing to get right. And we've gotten much better at that in our third and fourth breweries, like building them in staged processes, having utilization thresholds that trigger in order to unlock the next build. So building manufacturing is really tough. And I know it was extremely out of vogue in pre 2020, especially 2021. But like at the time that switched, like now there's such a movement to onshoring for such obvious reasons. I think people realized how vulnerable supply chains were. But when 2020 hit and COVID, we were so lucky to be vertically aligned there. We weren't relying on a network of like 8 to 10 different aid vendors and stuff for 3PL, for production, everything. It was Athletic doing everything. And that was a huge competitive advantage in that time period and the current environment.
So I want to ask you one thing here that comes to mind too is obviously when investors invest and customers, employees, it's all betting into the vision, right? And talking about the vision here, if you were to go to sleep tonight and you wake up in a world where the vision of the Athletic is fully realized, what does that world look like?
I think it's a moment where you can go into a bar and restaurant and open up both sides of the menu, alcoholic and non-alcoholic, and you can be equally as excited as both. And I think that's when we've had our real impact, when people can hold delicious non-alcoholic beverages and have people excited to talk about that. And I think Athletic achieves that and has like broken the barrier to that happening in society. So definitely that for sure.
That's amazing. So now talking about the past, but I want to talk about the past with a lens of reflection. Let's say I put you into a time machine and I bring you back in time to that moment where you're about to give your notice at point 72 and about to venture into the unknown. And let's say you're able to stop that younger self that is coming out the door of point 72 and being able to sit that younger Bill for a coffee or for whatever that is. And being able to give that younger Bill one piece of advice before launching a business. What would that be and why, given what you know now?
So for me personally, I'm lucky the fire burns so strongly. I think the riskiest thing for entrepreneurs in that moment is if they don't like absolutely love their idea, it's gonna be the toughest journey ever ahead. But like I loved my idea, and so there's a million things I should have learned and known at that point that I didn't know, and I know some of those now. But like the passion burning is so key. It's like so key. And I was really lucky to have like good household support too and an awesome co-founder. There's a million lessons on fundraising, getting good legal advice, having really good investor alignment. I think communicating time horizon and like aligning goals with your investors is so important. Um, a lot of like governance things too that I see founders get in trouble with, but there's like so many learnings along the way that are really important, and you pretty much only learn those by going through it yourself. So I think at the end of the day, if passion is there, then like time is the other variable, because like time and like just like working at your problems solves all of them basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Bill, for the people that are listening that would love to reach out, learn more about The Athletic, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Super easy to get me there. And then all our information is at Athletic Brewing on social. Athleticbrewing.com on the internet is where we launch our 50 limited releases every year. And so, yeah, it's I'm just out here having fun, but I love to hear from entrepreneurs too. So please hit me up.
Amazing. Well, hey, Bill, thank you so much for being on the Dealmaker Show today. It has been an absolute honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast. Really appreciate it.